Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum once again. Welcome to the first session of Dhaka OIC Youth Capital 2020 titled Resilient Youth Leadership Summit. We had a very beautiful opening ceremony today, this afternoon actually. It's evening here in Dhaka. And we had none other than the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, who inaugurated it. And we also have all the decorated professionals and leaders around the world who were present there and they participated. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, in this first session of Resilient, the Youth Leadership Summit, we have the Honorable State Minister for Youth and Sports of Bangladesh, His Excellency Mr. Zaid Hassan Russell, MP. Also, we have His Excellency Mr. Taha Ayhan, President of Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, ICYF. He'll be joining us online. And we have His Excellency Mr. Masood bin Momen. He is the Secretary Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, who will be the moderator of this session. First of all, I'd like to request the Honorable State Minister for Youth and Sports, His Excellency Mr. Zaid Hassan Russell, the guest of honor, to kindly say a few words.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency Mr. Taha Ayhan, President of ICYF, Mr. Masood bin Momen, Honorable Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh, Mr. Muhammad Akhtar Hussain, Secretary, Ministry of Youth and Sports, Bangladesh, Mr. Sheikh Fazle Fahim, President, Federation of Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce and Industries, Mr. Sudipto Mukherjee, Representative UNDP Bangladesh, Mr. Anil Chaudhary, Policy Advisor of HUI, ICT Division, Dr. Hamid Rashid, Chief of Global Economic Monitoring at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, Climate Vulnerable Forum Presidential Special Envoy, Dr. Sebastian Groh, Managing Directors, Soulshare Limited, Excellencies, Youth Delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. At the outset, I would like to pay my deepest gratitude and homage to the greatest Bengali of all times, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the icon of youth as we have gathered here at the Dhaka OIC Youth Capital 2020 event on the auspicious occasions of the birth centenary of the father of the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank each and every one of you for joining with us here today. We are very pleased to be able to welcome you to the Resilient Youth Leadership Summit of the Dhaka OIC Youth Capital 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ministers, diplomats, dignitaries, and 250 youth representatives from OIC member states and beyond at the summit here today. I express my utmost gratitude to the Honorable Prime Minister, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, for declaring the inauguration of the Dhaka OIC Youth Capital 2020. I convey my gratitude towards participants and contributors for being here to share their valuable knowledge and experience with us. Ladies and gentlemen, the summit is taking place today in participation with 250 global youth leaders who will connect with the expert panelists and participate in various day-long activities to learn and craft the strategy to build a resilient world. Particularly in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, the summit emphasizes the leadership, vision, ideology, imagination of the youth for construction and innovative, resilient and inclusive narrative to ensure a leadership position in the affairs of the world. So this program is particularly important in the COVID-19 and post-COVID recovery and reconstruction for an equitable global economic order. Ladies and gentlemen, we often hear that the youth are the future, but it's time we acknowledge that they are also the present and the most relevant stakeholders in building up resilience against COVID-19. We must ensure that the voice of youth are properly heard. They should be involved at every stage of policies and interventions, starting from the design phase through to implementation and finally monitoring and evaluation. To do it, we are going to establish a youth council to represent the youth of the country. Every year, we organize a youth summit where some international youth leaders are invited. Resilient Youth Leadership Summit aims to bring together those youth with promise for a better today and for a brighter tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh has made significant economic and social progress in recent years under the prudent leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister of the Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. Bangladesh currently has a population of 53 million youth who are the prime force for the nations toward fulfilling the targets set by our Honorable Prime Minister to become a developing country by 2021, achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, become a developed country by 2041, and finally realize the dream of building a Sonar Bangla, the land of gold. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to inform you that Mr. Shoji Wajid, the ICT advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, has played an instrumental role in introducing and implementing the concept of Digital Bangladesh, which seeks to transform the country into a technologically advanced nation by the year 2021. Mr. Shoji Wajid was the first Bangladesh to be selected as Young Global Leader for the year 2007 as an information technology specialist by the World Economic Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, this year also marks the 100th birth anniversary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founding father of our nation. Our Honorable Prime Minister emphasized that nobody in Bangladesh would remain unemployed in this Mujib year. But like the most countries, we have to also had a setback in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. To build resilience against the COVID-19 under the direction of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the Ministry of Youth and Sports of Bangladesh has taken some initiatives engaging the youth from Bangladesh and from across the world. One, to create self-employment and employment opportunities and skilled manpower, an agro and vocational training project has been taken for the village-bound youth. Two, under the virtual skill development project, online training programs on outsourcing and communicative language are under active consideration. Three, to create employment opportunities for the youth and for marketing of the youth product, an e-commerce platform, jubopaikarisell.com, has been launched on 21st May this year. 4. Youth branding is another initiative of the Ministry of Youth and Sports. 5. In order to create self-employment and employment opportunities for the youth entrepreneurs, training on different categories is being continued. More than 300,000 youth will be trained every year. 6. In order to create awareness on social activism, we are offering some soft skill training to the youth throughout the country. Ladies and gentlemen, youth are the most affected in COVID-19 pandemic as they are the most active stakeholder in the society in terms of productivity, mobility and interaction. So this COVID-19 crisis is disruptive in terms of their lifestyle and prospects of their future. This crisis situation has opened numerous windows of opportunity for the youth to find alternative means in response to the COVID-19, especially for the more vulnerable communities and stakeholders in the society like the Rohingya refugees. The youth can play a vital role in building up resilience against COVID-19 pandemic through digital activities and by coming up with new ideas. I believe today's event is a great opportunity for the youth who are participating from all over the world to showcase their talent and to prove that they are capable to lead the world towards a better future for all. Resilient Youth Leadership Summit will allow us to incorporate the youth in policy formulation process and get innovative ideas and solutions from them on how to better manage the COVID-19 crisis in terms of addressing the emergency as well as building post-COVID resilience. But by introducing the participants to the displaced, persecuted Rohingya community from Myanmar, I believe that this event will help us building up a sense of awareness among the youth about the ordeal and struggle of the Rohingya community. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end, I would like to thank all moderators, panelists, and participants once again for joining us today. I also express my hope and confidence towards the youth of the world that they will certainly make this world a better place than what it is now. Thank you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu, may Bangladesh live forever.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Honorable State Minister for Youth and Sports, for your nice words. You also represent the youth of this country, Honorable State Minister. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as I have told you earlier, Mr. Taha Ayhan, President of Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, ICYF, he is here with us online. So I would request Mr. Taha Ayhan right now to say a few words on this occasion.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency Zahid Hassan Rusal, State Minister for Youth and Sports of Bangladesh, His Excellency Harivar Bey, Dutch Ambassador to the Bangladesh, His Excellency Sultan Mukherjee, Resident Representative of UNDP Bangladesh, Mr. Sheikh Fazl Fahim, President and Federation of the Bangladesh Chambers of Commerce and Industries, Dr. Hamid Rashid Bey, Chief of Global Economic Monitoring at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Excellencies, distinguished scholars and delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and dear young people, are my brothers and sisters. First of all, there are many special guests with us today. Please accept my apologies if I have missed any names. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and peace be upon you all. It's my pleasure to be part of this historical happening for Dhaka, the OISU capital, and it pleases me most to welcome you all to this unique event of the Resilient Youth Leadership Summit, themed COVID-19 Crisis, Youth and Technology in Building a Resilient Future. This Resilient Youth Leadership Summit is brought to you by the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, ICYF, and the People's Republic of Bangladesh's Minister of Youth and Sports and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. It's the first activity under the framework of Dhaka, OISU Capital of 2020. Global youth leaders from 75 countries will participate in the various day-long activities to learn and craft the strategies for a resilient world, particularly in the context of this pressing COVID-19 pandemic. The Resilient Youth Leadership Summit from Dhaka, the OISU capital of 2020, has a valuable message to the world. That is to bring together individuals with the promise for a better today and brighter tomorrow, and that each life is accompanied with potential and promise. It is in the youth that this potential and promise is present and fulfilled. On this very special occasion, I would like to extend my warmest regards and profound thanks to Her Excellency the Prime Minister of Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, and to His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and to His Excellency the Minister of Youth and Sports, and to all Secretariat of Dhaka, the OISU capital, for organizing and hosting this year's OIC Youth Capital, and for convening us and convening this summit on such critical topic of Resilient Youth Leadership Summit at a very critical moment. My heartfelt congratulations to go to the City of Youth and Development of the People's Republic of Bangladesh and to the beloved people of Bangladesh for the deserved selection and for the successful inauguration of the Dhaka OIC Youth Capital for 2020. Today, we are proud to be in the presence of brilliant youth from hailing from all our member states and beyond. An event defined by global presence and much inspiration and hope for a better tomorrow. Dear ladies and gentlemen, as you may know, the member states of OIC are the collective home of 1/5 of the world's youth population, a number that's only expected to rise with the years. 2 decades from now, nearly 1/3 of the world's youth will live in member countries of Organization of Islamic Cooperation. This provides plenty of opportunities, but certainly poses great challenges. We envision hope through collective thinking and developing innovative strategies and mechanisms to harnessing youth as stakeholders and agents of sustainable change in their communities and in their nations and for the Ummah. And we are here together to assure that youth take on the position of boundless creativity, resilience, and engagement, acting as catalysts of development, economic growth, security, and a peaceful solution. Dear OIC youth, as we move forward towards realizing our better future, we should seek to work together and develop more effective means of understanding and cooperation and solidarity. And for that, we need to seek out strategic partners and identify existing efforts, both among our member countries and beyond, thereby facilitating the sharing of our best practices and learning from successful experiences. In this, we should maintain our priorities and commitments and actively work on the priorities and goals set down by the OIC 2025 Program of Action, OIC Youth Strategy, and 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. Within these guiding frameworks, youth are both the agents and the subjects of development. Today, as we all know, the world has been greatly afflicted by global challenges of conflict, extremism, rising mistrust, and all other problems. But most recently, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted the economic, social, and political life and our daily lives of our communities, to say the least. Certainly, in all of these, the OIC region has its own challenges beyond these shared global challenges. The summit and many other following events during the Youth Capital aim to involve youth globally in producing solutions to help them build resilience and find answers to the pressing issues, but also prepare them as effective leaders, builders, and change makers. From their peers and mentors, they will learn how to sharpen their interpersonal and problem-solving skills and to become responsible agents of development while serving their respective communities and societies and nations, and as a result, to the Ummah. Today, I congratulate the Secretary of Dhaka OIC Youth Capital for their undertaking and the opportunity they present not only for the youth of Bangladesh, but for all OIC member states and beyond, to connect, share, celebrate, and build bonds for greater futures. It is in this context that ICYF continues to implement programs and projects such as model OIC clubs, entrepreneurship programs like Young Business Hub, a variety of ICYF online training courses, academic events, through international Muslim intellectual forums, the intellectual Islamic heritage as seen by the youth of Eyes of the Youth, Young Leaders Summit, media training, volunteering training camps, in addition to the training of youth activists and institutions on Islamophobia, ICYF initiative uncovered by youth, stories of youth by youth for youth, several essay, photography, and art contests. Currently, we are conducting a youth medic training program and soon will be launching the first ICYF Young Women Entrepreneurs as drivers of SDGs, jointly with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and in partnership with the OIC and other international institutions as ITPO Bahrain. Moreover, we are engaging in more United Nations initiatives to help our youth contribute to SDGs and environmental development. Through those many programs and efforts, we stay focused on advocating the interests of youth and developing their potential, capacities, and skills in the OIC region and globally. Dear Excellencies, distinguished scholars and delegates, dear brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we successfully implemented several virtual projects and programs to meet the diverse needs of our youth. We have worked with youth around the OIC geography to better understand their needs and aspirations and have designed programs and projects that further and better enhance their capabilities and prepare them for future. Please allow me to briefly share some of those programs with you. This is an open invitation for all our youth to join ICYF activities soon. In the special edition talks program, we are hosting decision makers and we are speaking about critical topics such as economic empowerment or capacity building or education with the high profile decision makers and policy makers. In the Islamic Intellectual Heritage webinar series, we are promoting awareness about the Muslim intellectual contributions to science, cultural exchange, and cultural diplomacy with very esteemed researchers from all around the world. With the Ideathon Challenge program, we have collected the best experiences and actions and responses put forward by youth individuals and communities during the outbreak. Our volunteering training program, we had aimed to equip young people with practical knowledge to help and support their communities during pandemics and in natural disasters and to the humanitarian crisis. More than 100 participants from 52 countries have attended to the volunteering training camp. In the virtual debate championship that we have already carried out last week, this is to enhance youth effective critical thinking and help them recognize strengths and weaknesses of arguments and also strengthen youth civic engagement and promote the culture of dialogue. In the virtual model OIC clubs, we are kicking off a series of panel sessions in cooperation with the international organizations on COVID-19's impact on the economy, human rights, humanitarian aid, and so on. And in the online media camp, which we are aiming to equip young people by developing content stories in a powerful way for being the voice of their communities. And today, we are fortunate to launch together the first program of Dhaka Youth Capital 2020, which is designed to provide youth with various capacity building programs, contests, digital caterings, cultural workshops, and solutions hub for youth. Unfortunately, we couldn't organize this in field due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are very sure that we will leave the barakah of these online trainings. On this occasion, we will also have the opportunity of a virtual tour of Rohingya camps in Cox's Bazar. This is organized in collaboration with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and International Organization for Migration under the supervision of ICYF, Dhaka Youth Capital Secretariat. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the bright future of our youth is dependent on the smart investment in youth talents, minds, quality education, science and technology. Only when we join our efforts and hold each other's hands in close cooperation and solidarity shall we overcome all global problems and challenges. It is time for increased major cooperation and solidarity among youth in facing challenges. I urge our member states, our member organizations, and all the volunteers to increase youth engagement and facilitate their collaboration in the context of sustainable development and all that it entails in the field of science and education and entrepreneurship, grounding such efforts firmly in the principle of values of Islam, dialogue, peace, and justice, as we have witnessed during our investment summits that we have organized last year in Kazan, in Bahrain, in Istanbul. To this end, I would like to reiterate the growing need for novel approaches, ideas, and solutions to issues affecting youth populations. Employment, innovation, science and technology education, civic engagement, and leading development in information technologies are some of many items in need of critical review and assessment. It's my deepest wish that the ideas formulated and raised here today will go far in addressing the challenges of our youth and communities and in making the best of the limitless potential found in our youth and the futures they deserve. And by the way, I want to underline one reality that young people, the youth, are not only the people who hold the future, but they're also holding today. While reiterating my profound thanks to you all, I pray to Allah, the Almighty Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, to grant us success in our new programs and projects, which will certainly serve the youth of the Ummah effectively. Dear young people of Bangladesh, my brothers and sisters, and of the OIC member states, we invite you to think of ICYF as your own organizational platform. ICYF is for youth and by youth. Only together will we forge a proud and bright future. Please stay tuned for future ICYF programs and initiatives. I wish you all success enjoying the magnificent Dhaka OIC Youth Capital for 2020. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ma'asalam. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taha Ayhan. You very much rightly said that this is the potential and the promise of the youth that is to be nurtured by the family leaders, the social leaders, or the professional leaders, and also the outcome of the country-to-country relationship and the partnership will help them grow their skill to face any pandemic or any other negative situation. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to request His Excellency Mr. Masood bin Momen, Honorable Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, who will be the moderator for this resilient session for youth leadership. He is coming on stage. In the meantime, I would request Ms. Amel of ICYF, who will talk about all the technical aspects and other technical issues. And after she finishes, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Sir. So, dear participants, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Resilient Youth Leadership Summit. I would like to inform you about some technical details and how to interact and ask questions in a written way. So, you are kindly requested to write your questions and comments in the question answer box. And please don't forget to add your name and your country. We will collect all your questions to be submitted to our esteemed moderator and speakers. And I will be reminding you frequently. If you have any questions, kindly contact me directly via the chat box. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Mr. Imtiaz, and also our technical team, distinguished panelists, young friends, ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Dhaka. Good morning and good afternoon to others connected from different time zones. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this session titled COVID-19 Crisis, Youth and Technology for Building a Resilient Future. As you are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health crisis. It has equally impacted our collective social and economic well-being. The pandemic has disrupted all aspects of our lives and livelihoods, that too for all groups in our societies. However, people of different ages are experiencing its effects differently. Though, in general, youth are more resilient to shocks, for many of them, COVID poses considerable risks. For example, youth's access to education, employment, disposable incomes, physical and cultural activities, all have already contracted significantly. These, if continued, can have long-lasting impacts on their future, as well as their physical and mental well-being. Therefore, we need to anticipate and effectively engage our youth more now. The world needs their energy, resilience, innovation, and leadership to successfully tackle all global challenges. Therefore, it is fitting that the theme of the Dhaka OIC Capital is Resilience for Parity and Prosperity. In Bangladesh, we have seen young people have sought innovative solutions during the crisis, solutions that are more person and care-centric, and solutions that incorporate inclusive and equitable growth, solutions that are driven by creating resilient communities. Young people's ability to innovate, empower, encourage, and engage during the crisis situation is what we would be exploring during this session. To begin our session, let me request Mr. Sudipto Mukherjee, Resident Representative, UNDP in Bangladesh, and followed by Mr. Anir Chaudhary, Policy Advisor of A2I ICT Division, to deliver their keynote speeches.
Thank you, Secretary Momen. Excellencies, very distinguished participants this evening. I shouldn't say this evening because you could be in different parts of the world, so A good day to all of you. My young friends, my co-presenter, Anil Chaudhary, Salam Alaikum. Let me at the outset congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and our government for hosting the 2020 OIC Youth Leadership Summit here in Dhaka. And for me, this is a particular honor because in the last 3.5 years that I've been here, I have witnessed many impressive global events happening in Dhaka. Dhaka is progressively becoming the capital, not just the youth capital of 2020, but it's becoming the international event capital of the world. Now to today's theme, which I think is of extreme contemporary relevance. We are going through very unprecedented times. Young people make up for 1/4 of the world's population, which is the largest youth population in human history. This source of untapped strength is also growing in various OIC country member states. By 2050, youth are projected to make up almost 1/3 of OIC countries' total population. However, at a time when young people should be striving to reach all efforts, aggravating challenges and pushing them to become the world's lockdown generation. While the COVID-19 pandemic is disrupting every aspect of people's lives in an unprecedented manner, with many of its implications, such as confinement-related psychological distress and social distancing measures, affect all society, different age groups experience these collateral socioeconomic impacts in distinct ways. In many countries, which is already in a process of gradual transition of government responses from immediate crisis management to the more medium-term socioeconomic recovery, several concerns are emerging, such as alarming increase in levels of youth unemployment and the consequences or related consequences for social stability, which have been mentioned by previous speakers. The implications of rising debt for issues of intergenerational nature, as well as threats to the well-being of youth and future generations. Let me also, in the particular case, because Rohingyas have been mentioned, and we know that this is a nation which is not only hosting them, but this is also a nation which actually has been a major earner of young Bangladeshis serving in different parts of the world. Let's take the case of migrants. Given that 70% of all international migrants are below 30 years of age, global epidemics like COVID-19 will hit this concrete population group the hardest. What is more, the pandemic will limit even more their access to healthcare and livelihood provisions while exacerbating the global stigma towards any minority group. In South Asia, we are particularly concerned here, and in neighboring India, returning migrants are all mostly young people who are at the moment completely clueless about prospects of return and who will also find it difficult to get a job locally. Now let us look at some of the impacts on young people. Let's look at education first. We know that as per UNESCO estimates, more than 90% of young people are out of education because of COVID-related closures. This represents more than 1.5 billion young people, of which about 50% are young girls. Plan International and UNESCO actually warned for a potential of increased dropouts, and which will disproportionately affect adolescent girls, further entrench gender gaps in education, and lead to increased risk of sexual exploitation, early pregnancy, and early and forced marriage. Looking at employment, skills and entrepreneurship, according to the ILO, if you're young, you're anyway 2.5 times more likely to remain unemployed. And right now we know that nearly 500 million young workers worldwide are currently employed. Only a quarter of them are in the formal workspace. And 1 in 6 people, and these are recent estimates, 1 in 6 people have stopped working since the onset of the crisis. Among those who are still employed, work hours have fallen by nearly a quarter. SMEs and startups have taken a big hit. Nearly 90% of young entrepreneurs in Asia Pacific, including in Bangladesh, are negatively impacted. With supply chain disruptions and fall in demand, 1 in 3 reported slowdowns in businesses, while a quarter stopped operating completely. We are going through unprecedented times. The impacts of the pandemic on youth labor market outcomes is severe, particularly in developing countries like Bangladesh, India, etc., with high rates of employment, and these are particularly vulnerable to such shocks. The lockdowns and the spread of virus has meant millions of young people who lack social protection, income benefit in case of sickness, are now at greater risk through inadequate access to universal health care. And while all sectors have been affected by the pandemic, those which are actually much more labor intensive and which basically are sort of employing more young people are more disproportionately affected. And again, with international and in many cases domestic air travel literally being off the air, and the advent of online tools like video conferences like this one, and we did hear earlier that even the next General Assembly of the United Nations will be held virtually. Global business trips have actually nosedived and are most likely to permanently decline post-crisis, with a significant knock-on effect on jobs in administrative support, in events, travel and transport. An increase in temporary and part-time jobs is forecast with little stability and benefits as companies become reluctant to return to full-time employment. We are going through unprecedented times. The COVID-19 crisis is reshaping the world of work and speeding the digital transformation across the world. We used to discuss about fourth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence, but while we were still thinking in February and March that it's still a few years before it will hit us really badly, it is already here. Remote work as well as online shopping, artificial intelligence and automation is experiencing a boom. With the rise of automation and artificial intelligence, the nature of jobs is dramatically changing, and there will be a need to shift in how young people are equipped with the necessary skills and training. The need becomes more pronounced for young women in countries like Bangladesh. Only 25% of female university students choose to study ICT-related subjects, and only 13% from ICT backgrounds actually go on to join the workforce. The accelerated use of digital technology is also reinforcing existing challenges, especially for women. In Bangladesh, which is a country of more than 160 million people, a little over 100 million people use the internet, mostly using mobile networks. And yet, in terms of mobile gender gap, 61% of women own a mobile phone compared to 86% of men. So they anyway do not have equal access to technology. And furthermore, only 16% of women use mobile internet compared to 33% of men. But on a good note, and let's mention a good note, more and more young people today can quickly adapt to rapid changes. They are more tech savvy, well informed and entrepreneurial. Young entrepreneurs under UNDP's wing right now are doing amazing work. I know of many such cases where they've actually, with the help of technology, are providing telecounseling services for mental health, safely delivering food and services to affected populations, and doing numerous other things, which is actually making our lives quite comfortable despite the difficult moments around. Let me share the inspiring story of a young teenager that I heard today, a young Bangladeshi teenager right now in Dhaka. He met a like-minded friend of his own age in Portugal online in March 2020, and within weeks started conceptualizing setting up something called Reach for Help. Look out for that name, Reach for, number 4, Help, a global volunteer-run initiative developing technologies to bridge the gap between people in need and volunteers who can help during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. And just a month from the launch, they've already got 8 full-time core team members and 300 part-time volunteers, and using open source technologies have developed an online platform working on streamlining and automating help requests, primarily food and medical supplies, for over 100 users around the world. And what is most striking is that while they started during a pandemic, these youngsters are confident to grow more and continue providing a platform to automate the logistics of helping people in need, whether it is during a crisis or during normal times. And this is an amazing, inspiring story. In conclusion, and before I hand over to my co-presenter and my brilliant colleague Anil Chaudhary, I want to reach out to all OIC members with one message, and that is an effective approach for response to the crisis and a sustainable recovery thereafter needs to be informed by a better appreciation of needs and priorities across different age groups. Building better requires decision makers to acknowledge generational divides and address them decisively in order to leave no one behind. Thank you very much, friends, and wish you all a lovely day. Over to Anil.
Thank you, Sudipta. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. Is it possible? Can you see my screen? Everybody?
Yes.
We do.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Sudipta. Honorable State Minister for Youth and Sports, respected ICYF President, His Excellency Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, UNDP Resident Representative Sudipta Mukherjee, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and most importantly, my young friends from OIC countries across the world from different regions and time zones. Assalamu alaikum, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to you all. So I'll talk about, I think Sudipta has set the stage for a number of different things, but I will try to narrow down our focus to three things: education, employment, and entrepreneurship. I call it triple E. If you look at the election manifesto of our current government, which became the government document last year, one of the three key pillars was the power of youth, focusing on the power of youth. And there are 7 key segments that you will see. So spirit of the liberation war and social values driven youth empowerment, demand driven human resource development, employment and entrepreneurship, safe migration, encouraging of culture and sports, eradication of terrorism and drugs, and innovative research. So this is basically how we see the power of youth driving the progress of the country towards the sustainable development goals, and even before that, next year, the achievement of digital Bangladesh on the 50th anniversary of the country's birth, and LDC graduation, and so on and so forth, and moving us towards a developed country by 2041. So that's what we see youth doing for us. But what is really happening during the COVID times? I think Sudipta actually already talked about some of the statistics, that about 1.5 billion learners, about 90% of the education population are dislodged from their general institutions. Still, about 1 billion are dislodged. So about 500 million have gone back, but about 60% are still dislodged in 160 countries around the world. So how have we tackled this? So with technology. So this is again worldwide, but I also talk about what has happened in Bangladesh. So worldwide, we have seen a proliferation of the use of internet, certainly, but also the use of old technologies, traditional technologies such as radio and television. And in Bangladesh, we have actually used it very, very effectively. We have seen education kits, home kits where they can actually do experiments. We have seen cellular networks using text messaging, and in the case where there is no internet, students calling into phone lines and talking to teachers. So we've seen that in many countries. Obviously, in 4 and 5 of the circle that you see on the right, online teacher materials, resources, and the websites, online education. So those are the standard ones, but we're seeing many innovations around the world. But still, this remote learning is actually out of reach for about half the population, about 500 million students across the world. In Bangladesh, I'll just give you one example. we have been able to repurpose our parliamentary TV, which is used primarily for parliament broadcasts every few months for a few days, and the huge resources lie dormant. What we did was, within about 8 days of the pandemic shutting down the country, so we had the school system shutting down in the 3rd week of March, and by the end of March, the countrywide lockdown happened on the 25th of March, but by about the 29th of March, we started broadcasting education programs across the country on the Parliament TV. So far we have been able to reach about 30 million students across primary, secondary, technical and madrasa education, with about 4,500 classes in the last 3 months. So this is a huge achievement and an innovation that was catalyzed by the 2 ministries of education that we have, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Primary and Mass Education, with the support from A2I to actually move towards TV to reach out to about 60 to 70% of the population, student population of the country. But still, as Sudipta talked about, we have huge divides. We're still not able to reach the poor, the ultra poor. We're actually leaving out a lot of the female students because they don't have access to technology as much as the men do, as much as the male students do. We're still not able to reach the students with disabilities. We're not able to reach refugees. We're not able to reach many of the internally forcibly displaced population within the country. And across the world, in fragile and conflict-affected areas, we're not able to reach the students. So even with technologies covering the globe and covering all nooks and crannies almost, we are leaving out huge pockets because of digital divide. Now, in terms of jobs and skills, there is significant thing I would like to point out to the graph on the right. You will see that the general unemployment has risen slightly, but the youth unemployment, if you look at it, youth unemployment has always been higher than general unemployment. So that has risen from 14.6% to about 15.4%. But the shocking thing in the case of Bangladesh is that we're seeing university graduates unemployed at the rate of 39%. So that's almost 8 to 10 times higher than general unemployment rate. So basically, we have created an education system that is placing the young population who have gone to tertiary education, they've placed them outside of the market. So that's an alarming thing, and that's growing over time. So this is also happening in many other countries, many other developing countries, and in OIC countries. Fourth Industrial Revolution. We did a study last year in the context of Bangladesh, and this is not uncommon in many other developing countries, in the OIC countries. So we looked at 5 sectors of the economy: garments, furniture, agro-processing, tourism and hospitality, and leather. In the next 20 years, we've seen that we'll actually lose about 5.5 million jobs. New jobs will come out, new jobs will actually happen, but we have to prepare for them, we have to reskill our youth, we have to upskill our youth. Interestingly, this fear of fourth industrial revolution taking our jobs has just been accelerated by COVID. So we just did a study 2 months ago, which is just released a few weeks ago. It was a quick study, but if you look at the 11 sectors, we actually are looking at a huge job loss of about 20 million already, and maybe another 8 million or so by the end of next year if we don't take drastic actions. But interestingly and optimistically, we're also creating new jobs in agro-food, in healthcare services, in ICT and e-commerce. Sudipta already talked about some of the new things that are happening in e-commerce. It's going through a huge boom, unprecedented boom in the last 3 months. Pharmaceuticals, creative media. So we will be creating almost 4 million new jobs, but we have to make sure we prepare youth for these new jobs. Otherwise, these new jobs will just be only on paper. We have been working on a 6-pronged strategy for youth towards a resilient future and building the nation, towards a resilient nation. So the first is consistently narrow the supply and demand gap. There is a huge gap, and that's why we have such high unemployment in the tertiary education graduates. Focusing on evidence-based policy making, so we're going to actually use a lot of predictive policy making, use a lot of data, what we call collective intelligence, to make our new policies and make them much more market focused based on evidence from the market. creating a shared responsibility and accountability with the private sector so that the private sector never feels it's the responsibility of the government only to create jobs. So it's a shared responsibility that we're working with, and we have a number of industry partners. We have amongst our panel the respected president of the Federation of Chambers and Commerce and Industries. So he will probably talk about how we can build this shared responsibility. Developing a long-term financing strategy to support future resilience. This is where entrepreneurship support and a lot of the SMEs in Bangladesh are suffering now because of lack of financing, because lack of capital, because of COVID. So we're looking at a long-term financing strategy. Embedding social, economic, and environmental resilience in our strategy and planning, and leveraging digitization. Some of the examples I've talked about is actually because of rapid digitization, we've been able to tackle the pandemic in very, very creative and innovative ways to build an entrepreneurial and education continuity in our country. This is a busy slide, so I don't expect you to go into all these specific details. But recently we launched with UNDP Regional Innovation Center in Bangkok, launched by the Assistant Administrator of UNDP, the Future of Work Lab. And this is where we'll be seeing a lot of experimentation, a lot of ideas coming in from the private sector, from the government, and from the NGOs, and of course the academia. And this will give us some new insights for how we will be doing data-driven evidence-based policy formation, how we'll be doing social protection for our youth, how we'll be doing financing reform, how we'll be dealing with the migrants who are returning and how we need to reintegrate them into our workforce locally, and a lot of different things. A special focus will be on integrating and rejuvenating the small and medium enterprises and a rise of entrepreneurship and digital entrepreneurship within the country. We have a national skills portal that we have developed in collaboration with the National Skills Development Authority under the Prime Minister's Office, the ICT Ministry, A2I. And this National Skills Portal has served us well in the last few years, but it will be repurposed, reshaped to make this a lot more demand-driven and resilient to new markets that COVID will actually reshape. This is an example of how we have launched last year with the Skills Portal about 50 Fourth Industrial Revolution projects, and many of them are actually relevant in the COVID context. So about 27 projects are with about 20 industry associations, 16 projects with 13 ministries, and 7 projects with 2 public universities. And a lot of these have to do with data-driven decision-making, new kinds of skills that we are seeing across the board in many different sectors such as agro-food, light engineering, garments and textile, and tourism and hospitality. So these 50 projects will actually give us deep insight about the kind of policy formulation that we must have for our youth to become resilient. I end with 4 questions for the panelists. What will blended learning look like after COVID-19? When we open up schools and colleges and universities, will we stop doing the huge online and TV-based learning and phone-based learning that we have done? Or will this become a facet of our new education system? Are the youth ready for the post-COVID employment and entrepreneurship? Unless we make drastic decisions in our curriculum, in our assessment system, they will not be. So we have to make some rapid decisions in preparing ourselves, our education system, and certainly the youth for the new employment and the new entrepreneurship paradigm. Will the youth meaningfully contribute to these education, employment, and entrepreneurship policy formulation? Will they be just recipients? Or will they actually be advisors and drivers of this new policy formulation? And last but not least, how do we ensure effective cooperation for youth towards resilience amongst the OIC countries? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anil Chaudhary, and also Mr. Sudipto for your presentations. A lot of rich inputs to digest. But I'm sure some of the listeners and viewers would be asking questions. Let me now turn to Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, Special Envoy to the Climate Vulnerable Forum Presidency, to deliver his statement on climate change, the next battlefield for humanity. Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, please.
Thank you, moderator, and also the keynote presenter, Sudipta and Anil Chaudhary. Dear participants, welcome. So, if we look into the climate change, we have extracted so much so from the nature that created imbalance, and the present pandemic corona is one of the example of over extraction and outcome. Let me give some statistics about the carbon dioxide. Its concentration is in the atmosphere as on May 2020 is the highest in the history. Another figure, 2019 was the second warmest year. 11% of the global greenhouse gas emission is due to deforestation. 800 million, there is 11% people are vulnerable. And 800,000 hectares of land lost every year. Transport itself 20% of carbon emission, and heating and cooling, it consumes 50% of the energy. More than 1 death per minute for climate change. So these are a few figures in terms of the say climate change. If we look into the global situation of climate change, starting from Afghanistan, the landslide, flood, and avalanches in subarctic Afghanistan, or land degradation in coral reefs, archaeologists and Comoros, drought-prone Ethiopia, increased flood severity and increased temperature in Gambia, prolonged drought in Burkina Faso, reduction in hydropower in Ghana, hurricane and sea rise in Caribbean island state, Grenada, drought in Haiti, flood, river erosion, all these are examples in Bangladesh. These are the imbalances in nature. The reality is we are harnessing more than the nature can produce. And by this, we are accelerating the destruction of the globe, as if cutting the branch of a tree sitting on it. If this continues for global warming and melted glaciers, sea level will rise, more carbon for further destruction of ozone layer. Ultimate result is more hunger, more climate migration, more health hazard like COVID, and much more salinity, much more joblessness, lack of natural balance. So many island states go underwater, more global crisis and war. And the challenges which has been discussed by two distinguished keynote speakers. We did not forget the death of 5-year-old Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi, who drowned in the sea during migration. We did not forget the war-wounded 5-year boy sitting in the ambulance. So all these are a glimpse of exactly climate changes. So many unwanted, tragic death. Do we allow this to continue? Do we think to leave the world a little better than we found it and achieve SDG? Where are the solutions? Where are the solutions of joblessness, opening new area of works? So the silver lining, ray of hopes, obviously nature is the untapped solution. and restoring degradation of forest, it can create more job. And $1 investment in nature brings back 10. Also, the coastal low carbon ecosystem, it can consume 10%, 10 times of carbon stores. And save nature, it is the cheapest one. Just today, in Guardian, an article published by Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General, where he told, quote unquote, from catastrophic forest fires in California to rising sea level in Miami and devastating flood in Texas, these changes are a real and present danger. Our climate is visibly changing and the consequences will be disastrous for everyone, unquote. And the main challenge is to combat the 1.5 degree increase of the global temperature. So, in terms of the solution, the issues, Climate Vulnerable Forum, an organization of 48 climate vulnerable countries, and V20, from its creation, working with the youth, encouraging them to act for climate justice, and Global Center on Adaptation also identified youth engagement as one of the pillars for adapting with nature with local-led action by creating youth adaptation network and bringing opportunity to raise voice for the survival. I will come to an end with the quotes. In Quran, Allah said, quote, and we have created there in everything in balance, and Allah don't like those who work beyond their limit. Pope Francis, he said, if we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. He also said, God always forgives, man forgives sometimes, but nature never forgives. And we have exploited nature too much. Mahatma Gandhi said, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. To change the globe, to cope up with the situation, to cope up with the skills, fourth industrial revolution, as Anir and Sudipto were telling, we need a political commitment. I believe you have heard the voice of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina this afternoon, how strong voice she raised globally. We, the youth, need to work globally, maybe thinking locally, acting globally in this situation. COVID is with us. We need to live with COVID. And the question which has been floated by Anir, yes, the youth need to come up with their required skill to combat the COVID and the pandemics like more than COVID, which we have in Bangladesh, and youth need to work for forming the movement to save the nature, save the earth mother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, our special envoy, for his clarion call to the youth, not only of the OIC countries, but also the youth of the world, to rise to the occasion to combat the challenges of climate change. We have seen that many governments have resorted to or announced stimulus packages during the pandemic. Bangladesh is also no exception. Honorable Prime Minister announced approximately $12 billion stimulus package for various sectors in the economy to support the most vulnerable segments of our population. Let me now go to our next speaker, Mr. Sheikh Fazle Fahim, President, Federation of Bangladesh Chambers of Commerce and Industries, FBCCI, to share his thoughts on how this stimulus package may benefit our youth and the overall society. Mr. Fahim, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. All protocols observed. It is an honor to be joining this session on COVID-19 crisis, youth and technology for building a resilient future today. As we adjust to the next normal, we extend our cordial gratitude to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Youth and Sports and Ministry of Youth and Sports, Bangladesh, and Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum for organizing the Resilient Youth Leadership Summit as the first event of Dhaka OIC Youth Capital 2020. Esteemed presence, the current COVID-19 outbreak is volatile and its impact on socio-economic uncertainty on humanity beyond borders is clear to all. To address this situation, since February 2020, our organization initiated and are in constant engagement with both domestic and international stakeholders, including youth entrepreneurs, through our various network of partnership, including Commonwealth, International Chamber of Commerce, Confederation of South Asia, Confederation of Asian Pacific, grouping of 28 countries, and South Asia, on COVID-19 stimuluses, recovery, and sustaining our economy. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced stimulus packages with a mix of grants and loans of total $12.1 billion under 19 categories, which is about 3.7% of Bangladesh's total GDP. Food programs that catered to 40.5 million people, 5 million families were given direct cash, 90 million was earmarked for expats returning home, 235.29 million for self-employment and micro and cottage level job creations through Polli Sanchoy Bank, Kormosongsthan Bank, Expatriates Welfare Bank, and PKSF, that strongly address the unemployment factor that has affected an estimated 8.7 million youth workforce in Bangladesh, including job losses in the domestic markets, who are to be subsidized for 6 months through food programs and cash incentives, and expat returnees from various countries employed. Moreover, the stimulus package also extends supports of $588.23 million to the export-oriented industries, US $2.3 billion, $52.94 million to cottage, micro, small, medium enterprises, $3.5 billion, $29.41 million for large-scale industries, $588.23 million for agriculture, $82 million to those who are working in the informal sector. All these funds are revolving, and it should have an effect of 5 times multiplier in the economy. To address the above measures that I just shared with you, central bank have taken multiple quantitative easing measures through their monetary policy tools and instruments that have increased the liquidity in our banking systems. The first phase of intervention was non-fiscal measures, which were giving entrepreneurs and enterprises banking facilities to be not classified due to overdue of payments on the disruption of supply side. Second was the fiscal measures that the stimulus has brought in. Third intervention were the tariff and regulatory measures, where all income taxes, for the first time in last 10 years, were brought down in Bangladesh on individual level, and corporate tax was also brought down to 2.5%. Income tax exemption were also increased for males, female, and independent war veterans. In terms of the monetary policy measures and the fiscal measures are all in place to accommodate the challenges of COVID-19. However, Amphan and the flood situation has added on to those challenges. As you know that Bangladesh's 84% of our economy is in the informal sector, and our tax GDP ratio is not very healthy. Therefore, from FBCCI, we believe this is an opportunity during the COVID-19 situation to bring our informal sector in the formal one that will enhance our tax GDP ratio as well as our investment GDP ratio and assist in our LDC graduation and our move towards SDG goals. These informal and marginal businesses will also be enlisted in our comprehensive database to facilitate their integration into global value chain as we move towards our LDC graduation. In Bangladesh, with a young demography of more than 80 million below the age of 25, 50% of our population, and 1/3 of 160 million population aged 15 to 24, actively working as part of the labor force, we need to address the impact, both present and post-COVID realities. In line with Bangladesh's current trajectory, complementing government's vision and SDG 2030, FBCCI formulated numerous projects through our Vision 2041 with a core focus on youth, innovation, startups, technology, and we have partnered up with globally top-rated institutes such as University of Toronto, Canada, and TVET institutes such as Seneca College. The focus is to assess our industry, academia, HR gaps for our transitional economy, global HR requirements, STEAM-based curriculum, science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, mid-level management and above training, 4IR conducive curriculum, applied skills, fintech, applied research to enable trade facilitation. The Skill Lab will also address the pre- and post-COVID challenges on unemployment, entrepreneurship, and future of works. We hope to pursue more intensive engagements with OIC Youth Network through the OIC Youth Capital Dhaka 2020 forum this year. In mobilizing FBCCI Tech C, FBCCI Research C, Alternate Dispute Resolution C, Skills Lab initiatives, OIC Youth Platform Forum would be a value addition to our initiative. This is a potential to also explore joint cooperation, joint venture partnership in developing a halal ecosystem in Bangladesh going beyond just food consumption to cover halal fintech, halal technology, and halal manufacturing practices. FBCCI looks forward to working closely with our new generation of leaders at the OIC Youth Forum to develop out-of-the-box initiatives to current and post-COVID-19 challenges. Once again, thank you very much, organizer, for having us.
Thank you, Mr. Sheikh Fazle Fahim, President of BCCI, for your willingness to work with the youth of the OIC member states to explore business possibilities. Now, so far, Many of our distinguished panelists have highlighted on the need for innovative solutions to bring balance between life and livelihoods. However, is the present global economic structure being resilient enough to cope with the pandemic as well as such future crises? If not, do we need adjustment or a new economic model? Let us hear on this from Dr. Hamid Rashid, Chief of Global Economic Monitoring at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York, who will deliberate on COVID, youth and emerging economic order. Dr. Hamid Rashid.
Thank you, moderator, and excellencies, colleagues, and young friends from all over the world. A very good morning from New York, and I'm very pleased to join you here this morning to discuss some of the thoughts and also the question that the Honorable Foreign Secretary just raised. Let me first break down the title of this discussion. It has 4 key words: pandemic, resilience, technology, and youth. And I would address all 4, and in the process, I'll probably answer the questions question that came up. In order to understand the effect of the pandemic and how it will reshape humanity, we need to look back far back actually. Now we have about 2,000 years of history of pandemic, and we can see how that transformed the world in the past. If we look at the first recorded pandemic, the Justinian plague in 6th century AD, it basically outmoded slavery and introduced a new mode of production in Europe at that time. And also it was the advent of fall of one great empire and the rise of Islamic civilization. And if you look at the next pandemic, that just about 600 years later, the Black Death in Europe. And that also was the beginning of the Renaissance in Europe, which was basically a technological revolution, a new way of looking at the world, how to solve problems, not to take things for granted. So that was, again, a major leap forward. And if you look at the pandemic that happened 101 years ago, like the infamous Spanish flu, although it had nothing to do with Spain, but it got the name Spanish flu. If you look at the history, which is interesting, that basically accelerated the process of automation. And basically we saw the beginning of mass production in the world, and also the beginning of the American century, the Pax Americana. So the lessons from the past pandemics are clear. Pandemics always fundamentally change societies, and especially the way we consume, what way we produce, what way we interact with each other. And the more importantly, pandemics change the pace of change, the acceleration. The pandemics are accelerators. So this pandemic would not be different. What we will see in the next 10, 20, or 30 years is that we'll see a rapid acceleration of changes that were already in place. Many of you talked about fourth industrial revolution. We'll see that being accelerated going forward. Now let me turn to the question of resilience. This pandemic has shaken the foundation of resilience. It has basically made us aware that how vulnerable we are as a humanity. There's been massive disruptions in supply, in consumption and production behavior worldwide. It has shaken the foundation of the health care systems worldwide, confidence in the supply chains worldwide, confidence in social protection systems, confidence in the political institutions, even in democracies. So we would see a lot of loss of confidence going forward. And this loss of confidence would lead to a high degree of risk aversion. And there will be less global trade for sure. There will be less migration for sure. There will be less urbanization going forward, and less globalization also going forward. Less international cooperation, less multilateralism. And these are the consequences that we have to live with, which basically means countries will be increasingly inward-looking, and they'll look for new sources of growth, new sources of prosperity going forward. And this is where our youth would need to play a very important role. Now, let me turn to technology. What will happen to technology? Like in the past, humanity would rely on technology to solve the problems, to restore confidence or rebuild resilience. Resilience in institutions, resilience in the trading system, and resilience in everything that we do. And this process will not be easy. This is like any change, there will be a lot of friction. But more importantly, there will be clear winners and losers in the process. And the winners and losers among countries, within countries, also winners and losers intergenerationally. Some generation, the generation that we're talking about, Generation Z, those who were born between 1997 and 2010, unfortunately, I have a bad news for them, because this could be the first generation in the last 100 years or so. They could be worse off than their parents' generation or their grandparents' generation. So we would see, unless we can reverse this declining downward spiral, they might be worse off than their previous generation. But that is not inevitable. We can change that, and they can change that. And this is where youth would need to play a very proactive role, especially if they can exploit the technologies to their advantage, to create more jobs, to create more opportunities, more entrepreneurship. And in the past, the nature of technology would change going forward. In the past, most of the technologies were trying to solve the problems of cost. Cost minimization was the main imperative. If you can bring things more value for money, then it is a sellable technology. Now we have to, with the resilience in mind, with the vulnerabilities that we have in mind, it's not enough to minimize cost. We have to look at the issues of doing better with less resources. Mr. Azad talked about how we exploited the nature. So technology has to change in that direction. So what I see going forward, 3 types of technologies will emerge as the winners. And their youth can tap into those technologies to make sure they are on the right side, not on the wrong side. The first technology that would really have a lot of traction going forward are the risk mitigation technologies. Technologies that will allow societies to anticipate risk, analyze risk, and mitigate risk going forward. Early warning technologies, and there AI and machine learning would play a very important role. And this is where the youth can play a very important role to sort of hone their skills in those technologies. Second kind of technology that would be very important and which will see huge proliferation going forward are what is known as experience enhancing technologies. Meaning that we are doing this panel discussion online, but how can we improve that? The virtual reality and augmented reality would play a very important role. We'll see more and more of those experience enhancing technologies coming into play, so that what people are missing in terms of urban experience, missing in terms of a conference experience, whether you can compensate those. Like traveling would become more virtual, and a lot of things would become more virtual, and this is the huge growth potential in terms of tapping into those technologies. Finally, the resource optimization technology, not cost minimization. How do we minimize our carbon footprint and using the technology, leveraging the technology? Basically, how do we leverage technology to improve climate adaptation and mitigation? So now my final point is that what can the youth do, and what future lies ahead for them? In fact, many of the countries that are in the backwater right now, that are facing huge challenges, they can turn those challenges into opportunities. Large population, countries with large population, with large stock of data and large flow of data, digital data, they can really, data would be the ultimate, basically, factor of input in the production processes. All the technologies that I mentioned, without data, without reliable data, without verifiable data, without cost-effective data, these technologies would not develop. And countries with large population, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, Turkey, with large population, with large stock of data, they would have a leg up in terms of advancing those technologies, because you need to have access to data at the granular level, at the individual level, to shape, to mitigate risk for a community, for a society, for cities. But access to large data would be a necessary condition at best. We would also need to have the right kind of regulatory framework governing the data. We have to find a good balance between privacy in one hand. A lot of people would value privacy, but the other hand is access. If we tilt too much in favor of privacy, that we may not have the data in a cost-effective way that can spark innovation. So it will be very important that we have the right regulatory framework to make sure that data are accessible and usable for the youth. And finally, there will be a transformation that the youth themselves have to come up with. Transformation of being the users of data, the users of technology. Because most of the youth, when we look at digital knowledge or digital literacy, we think about being able to use iPad or iPhone or smartphone is enough. That's not enough. They are using technologies and they are consuming technology, but they're not producing technology. So they have to be the producers of technologies, and that would take them in the forefront in terms of shaping the future for themselves. And it's not a zero-sum game in terms of there will be a lot of jobs destroyed going forward, but a lot more jobs will be created in terms of in health prevention, risk prevention, in terms of many other sectors that we can think about. I won't go to the list, but all of them would be dependent on digital technology. And how we ensure the access for the youth to tap into those technologies will be very, very critical. My last point, I want to address Mr. Foreign Secretary's question that definitely global macro environment would not be conducive going forward. Global political environment would probably deteriorate faster than the economic environment. And that is an opportunity for many countries to tap into their domestic resources, the data resources they have, and build the right infrastructure to come out of this pandemic stronger and more resilient. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid Rashid, for your in-depth comments and about some of the positives that you mentioned, especially there could be also more job creation than job loss. So that was good. Perhaps we have already entered a new era, that is the new normal. And this is not only for COVID, but also the fourth industrial revolution, as many of the panelists have already talked about. COVID may further accelerate adoption of the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution symbiosis between man and network would challenge our workplaces, our existing skill sets, and our present attitude towards work and business. Already we have seen how companies like Uber or Netflix or many of the e-commerce platforms and many others have successfully entered and survived without having a large physical presence in different countries. This has a major implication on workforce. As one of the countries, our workforce would also new skill sets and also reskilling, competitive and relevant for the future job markets. Celebrate on this, may I now request Dr. Sebastian Groh, Managing Director, SoulShare Limited, to deliberate on hot skills post-COVID context.
Thank you very much, and as well, all protocols observed. I'll try my best to build upon what has already been said, and hopefully also be able to touch upon a few of the questions which Mr. Anil Chaudhary has floated. I'll also show a few slides to underline what and first of all, that last week I gave a small pep talk in a town hall at SoulShare, and the first question which was put toward me is, but sir, when does actually post-COVID start? And I was a little bit perplexed and wasn't quite sure, should I now quote the progress on the vaccines or what? And I think we have to change the perspective a little bit here too. And the title of this talk should rather be not hot skills post-COVID, wait for post-COVID, learn, and what if there's another COVID after, to live with this new reality, and hot skills with COVID. And talking about acting now and the power of youth, I just wanted to show a quick article here from the Daily Star, which came out actually end of March. So these were the very early days when COVID was unfolding. We had the first cases detected here in Bangladesh, and it says tech happening. Young ones lending a big hand. What the local startups are doing in the wake of coronavirus. And if you Google this article, you'll find examples of young startups here on food delivery, which everyone here in the panel living in Dhaka, retailing of remote health checkups, COVID analytics. We had a small maker space here in Dhaka, which when the supply chains across the world broke down, started 3D printing these face shields. Now they are available everywhere, but it was the intention that early on, end of March, before the hospitals and emergency stations run out of them, that those would be even 3D printed in the local makerspace. And also energy and internet access at the very last mile. And here, a little bit touching upon this new blended learning, how to guarantee that education continues, and really happy to hear about A2I's initiatives here, which were presented by Mr. Anya Chaudhary. And how can we fight against this digital divide? And I'm happy to offer support here from Solskjaer on energy and internet access to A2I to really be able to have continuous access so that education doesn't stop but can continue. I think this is really important. In the preparation of this talk, I checked a couple of sources like World Economic Forum, Forbes, Fast Company, and so forth. Everyone has an article, what are the hot skills with or post-COVID. And I just created this little word cloud, so you have these terms, and we heard them in the presentations already. Critical thinking, platforms, emotional intelligence, adaptability, data science, data. So these are the hot skills, but the question is, how do we nurture them? How do we access them? Are the universities across the world in Bangladesh, are they teaching these skills? And how can we improve this situation? What is interesting, and what also most of my previous speakers mentioned, was the COVID situation has accelerated the fourth industrial revolution. So the World Economic Forum, and that is a quote from 2 years back, the fourth industrial revolution is creating a perfect storm of business model change in all industries, resulting in major disruptions to labor markets. And that was kind of a prediction, that the question was, when is that storm coming? And the answer in the storm is now. And the storm was not so much as foreseen by the WEF, but it was actually in the face of this pandemic forum. I already mentioned 3D printing, important, and how much in the access to it and so forth. We hear Internet of Things, artificial, we had. I also mentioned by the previous speaker that there are jobs which will be diminishing. We even heard the job loss, Mr. Chaudhary said possibly 5.5 million. That's a staggering number. But there's also jobs which are new, which didn't exist before. So I think the huge challenge right now is, how do we prepare the youth for jobs today which do not exist yet? So we have to basically predict what is going to be needed. So I wrote here 14 years ago. Originally it was meant to be 10 years ago. That is, again, a slide from 4 years ago from the Future of Jobs report. And at that point, back in time, there was no drone operator, there was no social media strategist, there was no search engine optimizer or chief of listening officer, all these kind of neologisms and new jobs. So there's also new jobs. So the task for us is, how does the youth embrace those new skills to be fit for jobs which don't even exist today? And I think that's quite a challenge. Moving on, there are also potential adverse impacts. And I'll just mention 3 here. And usually if you have challenges and adverse impacts, that's where also opportunities lie. And that's where I would try to draw the attention of the youth. In terms of inequality, we hear those numbers from Oxfam. 62 people basically control the assets, which is valued more than 3.6 billion. I mean, that inequality in this sentence says it all. And we knew that before the crisis, but now I think the crisis unearths more and more of inequality, and it becomes more apparent, giving the digital divide, giving that we can work from home through Zoom calls, but the majority cannot. So these things we have to tackle. Also in terms of security, we know that the more unequal the society becomes, there is a certain correlation or causation possibly even, that society becomes more fragmented, there's more social unrest, so security issues arise. And lastly, as awesome as all the social media is, it also does create so-called echo chambers, which means, again, more radicalization, because we basically, the way the algorithms work of social media, we talk to our peers who have the same opinions, and this becomes accelerated then. So that is also a challenge out there which needs to be addressed. This post-COVID, with COVID society, we are all aspiring, and we heard that, so I'm going very briefly over it. It should be more inclusive, resilient, equal, and climate smart. We heard Mr. Assad quoting the numbers. We are heading towards a disaster. So this is also a chance, COVID-19, to recover better, to build back better in this momentum. And the key takeaways I would like to pass on for the youth here is, first of all, don't wait on post-COVID, act now with COVID. And Mr. Shudiptu also quoted an example. Within 1 month, somebody came up with a platform in a quick collaboration with the Portuguese youth. So act now, don't wait for post-COVID, and also don't wait for someone to help you, for the government to do something. Let's start, let's start walking the talk. And we heard the previous speaker again, change always brings about pluses and minuses. So I gave you the downsides, the slide before, because the downsides usually kind of hint us where are opportunities, where can we try to convert those minuses into plus. And these are opportunities in an economic sense, but also these are opportunities where we can have a real impact to make society more inclusive and so forth. So don't wait on others to help you, and take it into your own hands. And we see a lot of positive change happening already. I've been working here and investing in Bangladesh for the past 7 years, and I've seen tremendous change. If you take the energy sector, I'm working in the solar energy space, but only take this sector, in the last 7 years, it's massive what in terms of electrification happened, what in terms of capacity happened. Some things were short fixes, but another things were long-term strategic decisions. So under the leadership of the Honorable State Minister Nasrul Hamid, I think we did big leaps. We need to do more in terms of renewable energies, but I'm confident we can do that. And I would like to thank again for giving this forum, and pass it back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian, for your very illuminating points regarding hot technologies. We have actually covered a huge area this evening, and mostly, of course, technology and youth and the resilience factors. And we have already received a number of questions for our panelists. So if we can directly go to some of them, because some of them are also overlapping. First is the question from Mana Ahmed from the United Arab Emirates. And his question is, how can we build a flexible future for technology in the event that some of the countries have difficulties dealing with technology? What can be an alternative plan to integrate and act in building a flexible future with technology? So this is a tough one. How we can build a flexible future with technology, and do we have any alternative plan to integrate it? And especially given the fact that different countries have different levels of comfort or difficulties in dealing with technology. So this is an open question. Any of our panelists would like to respond? Dr. Hamid Rashid. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a very good question. I think flexibility is part of the resilience dynamics, because in order to be resilient in the future, we have to be very flexible. That means we'll move away from mass production, mass way to bring our products to the market, and move in the direction of more customization, more individualization of products and services that we consume. So that is where we are heading to in terms of in terms of, for example, the clothing would become much more customized. All the goods and services that we consume would be much more customized, and digital technology would bring the producers to the consumers directly. There'll be a lot less of intermediation in the processes. That means we'd see shortening of supply chains, shortening of many layers that we have in the production processes, and that would really lead to some efficiency, but also it will make more flexible, because right now many of the producers face the problems of building up inventories. They overproduce, expecting the market demand is there, and as soon as there is a shock, the demand falls very quickly, and they're stuck with their inventories. We'll not have that kind of situation in the future, because the market will become much more efficient in terms of anticipating any small fluctuation in demands. Every demand would be sort of traced at the individual level, and that would really lead to much more flexible production, a lot less waste. If you think about the waste that we do, even in every production process, about 30% is pure waste, and that can be eliminated, and that would also reduce the carbon footprint that we have. So I would like to put in place that the whole discussion on resilience actually is about flexibility, is about adaptation, is about customization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid Rashid. The next question is actually pointed towards Mr. Sudipto Mukherjee, and it is by Kainat Kazi from Pakistan. How we can balance the gender equality in case of access to technology, and especially in women entrepreneurship? Interesting question, Mr. Sudipto.
This is something that we've been sort of, in most developing countries, we've been trying to, not just developing countries, this is an issue with developed countries as well. This is a global problem. How do you actually get, gender empowerment or women's empowerment on track? I think despite whatever sort of the concerns that we have, one thing we need to realize that globally the progress that we have made in the last, say, 20-30 years in terms of getting better gender parity, getting more women's empowerment has been remarkable. So there is reason for us to be optimistic that we are on the right track. Secondly, there needs a lot of political commitment to make this happen. And if you have a prime minister like Sheikh Hasina, I mean, just as an example, you can be reasonably assured that she will leave no stone unturned to make this happen. I think so. There's a lot of political commitment that is required to make this happen. The third thing which I would mention, I think, is that it requires a sustained dialogue between all development actors and a global solidarity which need to happen. And I will go back to something that Hamid said. Very importantly, is about data. We have to make the right economic case to show that what the world is losing by not adequately empowering women. And I think, we've seen recent human development reports on this. We've seen, and we probably need to do more work in the context of Bangladesh. Actually, UNDP has invested in a lot of analytical works on this. And it clearly shows that there is an economic argument in all of this. And that economic argument is perhaps much easier to sell than anything else. This may not be the perfect answer, but I think I would think that we are on the right track, and we need to continue to advocate and also basically strengthen the hands of existing champions, including the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who is a living sort of idol of what women can aspire to.
Thank you. The next question is related to environment.
I cite just one example, Honorable Secretary.
Sir.
I want to cite just an example in addition to the answer which has been given by Mr. Sudipto. You see, in Bangladesh, there is a digital center, Union Digital Center. In Union Digital Center, there is one male, one female entrepreneur. Objectives was not only the entrepreneur, but in Union Digital Center, the male and female, they are coming. As soon as we have put one female there, so all the ladies, women of that area, they are coming to this lady. And this is one of the glaring example that in the rural level, this Union Digital Center is working for the gender parity. Just a small example. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have a question related to environment, so obviously I would request also you to respond, and that is from Udeshika Jayasekaral from Sri Lanka. And the question is, does Bangladesh have a foresight analysis mechanism in identifying the threats and challenges of climate change? If not, what else the steps that should take to face climate changes in the world? Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, would you like
Thank you. Thank you, Udeshima from Sri Lanka, for your brilliant question. You see, obviously, the artificial intelligence can be used for the future climate change, what might happen. But in Bangladesh, we have a plan for 100 years, which we call Delta Plan. From 2013, we started this plan. We finalized in 2018 the Delta Plan 2100. So we predicted what would happen in Bangladesh in 2030, 2041, 2050, 60, and likewise 2100. So the predictability we have in our country. Likewise, as we were doing in Bangladesh, some other countries were also trying, but unfortunately, they could not prepare their plan for the 2100. So these types of plan, obviously, this will be a dynamic plan, living document, because you don't know what will happen in future. Because the climate change, as we predict now, if it happens, then the globe will not sustain. So we need to turn the global trends of climate deterioration. But if we have the document, if you have the document like us, obviously you will also able to get some moral strength, courage that yes, we are also able to face the climate change in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Azad. Now I have two questions which have kind of similarity, and I'll direct them to the President of FBCCI as they relate to the economy. First question is Mehbiz from Bangladesh, and her question is how far will youth be able to contribute to the global economy in the coming years, especially with the lack of job opportunity and many losing jobs amid the pandemic. And the other question is from Hin Hitet U from Myanmar, and the question is entrepreneurship the best solution of our time to unemployment? What are other possible solutions to handle the costs of unemployment? So I thought these are two related questions, and if the Honorable President could respond.
The first question was about job opportunities, I believe.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you broke up. You mind repeating the first question again?
First question is, how far will youth be able to contribute to the global economy in the coming years, especially with the lack of job opportunity and many losing
Got it.
jobs amid the pandemic?
Got it. Thanks. Thank you very much. We believe that in terms of the policy support in Bangladesh, it has been designed with Bangladesh moving towards middle-income country in 2021. But we have achieved that in 2018, and many of the objective of the policy support that are required for the youths to come into the workforce is in place right now. Irrespective of the job losses due to an economic downward trend, this cycle will turn around because of the stimulus that has been in place. And this year we would be able to, if we are able to sustain our economy with the interventions that has been given in multiple stages through the tariffs and the loans and grants, by 2021, Bangladesh's economy will start to recover. For the youths, for the young entrepreneurs, you know that Bangladesh's startup ecosystem has gone through, has come a long way over the last decade because of Digital Bangladesh. And it's not only the technology-based opportunities, it's also the conventional opportunities that are through self-employment. Throughout our rural economy, we are seeing that many are choosing to go for self-employment in the agro-processing, agriculture, distribution, trade logistics, e-commerce, and many areas where cottage micro enterprises are employing 5 to 10 people. So the youth have great opportunities still in Bangladesh. As I said, that our economy is 84% in the informal sector. As it starts to, from the micro, small, medium enterprises, as it starts to scale up, many value chain opportunities will come about. And for the young generation to start any ventures at the early stage would be beneficial, because it's always beneficial to fail at the early stage. Then you take up chances at a later stage in life and fail. So we would, from our organization, we have a platform as a youth council. So if you are an aspiring entrepreneur, please get in touch with us. We have a program that might be of help to you. On the second question, it is always better.
Okay, you got it. Is entrepreneurship the best solution of our time to unemployment? What are other possible solutions to handle the costs of unemployment?
Well, unemployment is a reality in an economic situation that we are experiencing now, irrespective of all stimuluses and all interventions that the governments across any borders can come up. But self-employment is also an option. There are opportunities as many service providers. We are doing a study in different districts as to the self-employability of services which an individual can deliver to a respective area. Like the government's policy of digital centers, these are opportunities in various verticals of service deliveries where local entrepreneurs, instead of going into looking for a job, they can initiate their own business. There are policy support from the central bank for such entrepreneurs to go get funding without collateral. There are also new alternative financing options that are coming up in Bangladesh, such as venture capitalism, even though these are more targeted towards tech-based investments. But talks are going on to funding or as angel investors through a pool of angel investors for young entrepreneurs with products and services that are scalable, because our banking system is still going through a transition. where access to funds are not that easily accessible, even though the restructuring is underway. So, of course, in addition to getting a job, self-employment is definitely an alternative, but job loss doesn't mean the end of the world. I'm sure as there are job losses, economic recovery will also happen, so the opportunities, new opportunities will also come in line.
Thank you. Next, we have actually new sets of questions, so I would request the panelists to shorten their responses. As Mr. Anit Chaudhary left us with 4 questions, so I will get back to him with 4 similar questions if he could combine the answers. First, initiating online education has created digital divide because of lack of access of technology among disadvantaged people. How can we address this problem? Pacific Hakizi Amana from Rwanda. Next is from Bangladesh, Fahad Rahman Azhor. Do we need a new emergency post-COVID education policy to tackle the ongoing and aftermaths of the pandemic? The third one, in terms of having a buoyant and sustainable educational system, favorable employment and transformational entrepreneurial pattern, the lack of smooth transfer of technology may hinder the smooth education, employment and entrepreneurship. How can the OIC youths can overcome this? This question is from Techn, country not mentioned. And the fourth one is, how could we minimize the gap between automated, digitalized global market and current conventional workforce who lacks the skills and education for automated industries? So these are all somewhat related to education. I know that Anit Chaudhary Abai is not necessarily an academician, but we discussed education policy in Bangladesh in the past for on many occasions. So I would take the indulgence and ask him these questions.
Thank you very much, Honorable Secretary. Difficult questions. So online education has created a divide. But let's actually flip it on its side. If we did not have the online education, where would we be? We are able to reach about 60% of our students through TV, about 30%, 30 to 35% of our students through internet. But obviously the divide is there. So now we are exploring the possibility of using just feature phones so that students can call in and listen to micro bites of lessons, micro lessons, and can also communicate with teachers. This is a new innovation that we're launching very soon, and we'll see that that will actually reduce the divide somewhat. But the way to reduce divide further and the post-COVID education policy, let me actually combine my answer to the first one with the second one. As we heard that from Mr. Groh, that what does post-COVID really mean? I mean, it's not like post-COVID is happening next month or it's happening next year. We may have to live with COVID for some time. The impact may be less, but we have to live with it for some time. But that is actually potentially a good thing because it has changed our mindset irreversibly towards increased use of digitization. And we have to make sure that the access that we are able to provide to students who now have access is actually increased to the students who don't have access, which basically means yesterday we had an incredible meeting with one of the large telecom providers, and they're coming up with an education package for students that cannot afford the current internet cost. So the cost of internet, the reach of internet would actually grow. And if you create the right incentives and the right requirements from the government, then this will actually be accelerated as well. So cost and reach of internet, I think, is an important thing in terms of reducing the digital divide for the education. Now, whether we need a new education policy, I don't think so, because our current education policy is flexible enough that is actually resilient to see us through to such emergency crisis. Around the world, I think whether the education policy is as flexible as Bangladesh's, we don't know. But what is more important than the policy itself is the implementation of the policy. Whether we are changing the curriculum, whether we are changing the assessment system, and we are not doing that in as quick a way as it needs to be done in Bangladesh. So curriculum needs to be much more market responsive. The way we do assessment has to change dramatically, because we do an assessment at the end of the year. That has to be a continuous assessment process, and there are steps taken by the government of Bangladesh to change towards continuous assessment. So that's some of the things that we saw in the fourth industrial revolution skills, 21st century skills, critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving. Those can actually be addressed through continuous assessment. The third and the fourth question on entrepreneurship, some of it has been answered to some extent. There will be an emergence of new types of entrepreneurship. We are seeing new types of entrepreneurship in new supply chain. Supply chain was disrupted for a while. We saw the emergence of e-commerce. And in Bangladesh, we also saw the emergence of something called P-commerce, phone commerce. So customers would actually call in if they did not have access to the internet. They would call into a number and would order food or daily necessities or medicine, and that would be delivered to their doorstep. So this happened in the urban and peri-urban areas, and that's being expanded to rural areas. So that's a new surge of entrepreneurship that we have seen. We heard about data. Dr. Hamid talked about data, how data will actually create new types of entrepreneurship, because data will emerge as services. So we'll see a lot of entrepreneurship there. However, again, our education system is not pro-entrepreneurship. So you will see a lot of entrepreneurs happening in the early stage of education system, education dropout. So a high school dropout is much more likely to be an entrepreneur than a college graduate or an university graduate. So that basically says we have designed an education system that discourages entrepreneurship as you go up in the education ladder. So I think that needs to change, and we need to actually bring the new mindset of entrepreneurship and internship and basically experimentation in our higher education system. What was the last question? I couldn't quite capture that, the fourth question.
The last question was from Mr. Nayan Bishwas from Bangladesh. How could we minimize the gap between automated, digitalized global market and current conventional workforce who lacks the skills and education for automated industries?
Thank you. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen an emergence of what is now known as online freelancing. So we have about over 600,000 registered freelancers in the country, many of whom actually earn a handsome income every month by doing online jobs. And the government has taken steps to train many of these freelancers, but many of them, many more, actually work without the support of the government and learning on their own. And they are not always doing coding jobs. They do column writing for international newspapers. They do search engine optimization, which does not require coding skills. So the emergence of many type of online jobs that are happening in Bangladesh, where people are learning, students are learning on their own. And that's what's going to happen more and more. So this is the gig economy that we are seeing. That is, I mean, we're seeing that in Uber, we're seeing that in Pathao, we're seeing that in online freelancing. So you don't have a set job from 9 to 5. You choose your hours, you choose your type of work, and you actually train yourself towards that. And that again is an effect of what we now know micro-learning. So you actually go online and pick up a small certificate that requires you to do in 2 days, or another certificate that requires you about 6 days of training, and you do that on your own. And then we'll actually see a lot more of that in Bangladesh and around the world.
Thank you. Another question, which is also a very pointed question, and perhaps Dr. Sebastian can respond, and that is from Mr. Bayuzan from Kazakhstan. The question is, what is the most important hard skill for being on the top during the digital transformation and in the future? He talked about many hard skills, but the question is most important hard skill. Dr. Sebastian.
Sure, yeah, thank you very much. I think we talked so much about soft skills because this is what is kind of lacking what we learn in university. And Mr. Chowdhury just said it, if you actually go through university education, you're kind of getting discouraged to become an entrepreneur because it's more of the hard skills that you learn. But talking about hard skills, I think we heard the word data multiple times in this session. So I think it's geared toward if we hard skill as training to become a data scientist or a data analyst. I think these are things which are very strongly in demand. There is a list by the World Economic Forum actually what kind of jobs are most likely to be replaced by automation and what kind of jobs are not being replaced. And unfortunately, the jobs, or not unfortunately, but as a response to that, the jobs which require the highest degree of soft skills are most unlikely to be replaced. That's why all the emphasis on the soft skills here and less on the hard skills.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian. In fact, we have so many questions that I am told by my colleagues that it can go deeper into the night. However, we have already passed the time slot that we were allotted. So I'll just go for one more question, and that is from Afrian from Indonesia, which maybe can be responded to by Mr. Sudipto. And the question is, what we can do, whether as officials or NGO or youth, to address the challenges of using technology in rural and remote area. Ignore the fact that some areas even having difficulty to access electricity. So actually there are similar questions about the disadvantaged people having access, so a number of questions in that regard. Mr. Sudipto, would you care to respond? You there?
Yeah, probably Ani Chaudhary is better placed to respond to this question. But I think it's important to develop a mindset, an SDG mindset. I'm very mindful of the fact that we have Mr. Abul Kalam Azad here, who has been a principal SDG coordinator. So the mindset of the government is basically last comes first, and making sure that the investments in infrastructure that are required to reach the last mile are made. Then only we should be able to do it. There are, of course, innovations which are available. I've seen innovations which actually have allowed, whether it's alternative energy sources, whether it's there was a time when I remember still that even mobile phone technology, there were ways of reaching it out to remote areas to connect people. So I think it's a combination of, again, I'll go back to a combination of a mindset, a political mindset, which basically wants to leave no one behind, to make sure that last comes first, makes the right investment decisions because this will all require investments in hardware, and of course, letting 1,000 flowers bloom when it comes to innovations. Because, we do have, particularly in a country like Bangladesh, where every single day you see numerous innovations come up. In fact, the last 2-3 months that we've been under lockdown, I've been amazed at the number of innovative solutions that people have come up with in terms of making sure that even under lockdown conditions, people are able to weather the crisis. So again, I don't have the perfect answer, but I would defer to Anil to supplement.
No, I think we'll pass on that one because we are running out of time. I think you covered well. One last question from Mr. Nahinur Rahman from Bangladesh to Mr. Abul Kalam Azad. And his question is, sir, told in his session that forestation will make job opportunities in the system. I want to know what specific sectors regarding this will create these job opportunities. Where Mr. Ani Chaudhary sir mentioned that furniture industries will see a decrease in job opportunities, which is the main forestation-based industry. So very interesting question. So I thought I'll take this last one for Mr. Abul Kalam Azad, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You see, I told in my deliberation that about 800,000 hectares of land per year are from the forest. So deforestation is being happening in 800,000 hectares per year. So afforestation, normal huge job opportunity will be there. So many plantation, and at the same time, as furniture industry, not only furniture industry, the woods can be the huge natural resources which can multiply, have the multiplier effect in creating the jobs, and at the same time, it will save the nature. So afforestation, on the one side, the natural balance will be maintained. As I told in my deliberation that if we have the coastal belt afforestation, it can catch up 10 times of carbon dioxide. One glaring example in our country, that social forestry, a project is there. This very example is that in the government land, in the roadsides, in the embankments, the trees are planted. The land is owned by the government or the government agencies. This afforestation is being done with the support of the forest department, but take care is being done by the local people. Huge job is being created. After 10 years, these trees were cut down, and a lion's share is given to the beneficiaries, the local level people. In this way, nature is conserved and a huge job has been created. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Azad, for this response. We have already run out of time, and I would love to take more questions. Some of them I read and very interesting, very sharp, and we would need at least a few hours to do justice in responding them. So if I can request to the organizers if they can collate all the questions and maybe send it to our panelists. So if they have time, they can respond, and we can send them digitally in the coming days, because it would be really sad that if we let these questions go unresponded. If any panelists would like to say the last few words, like 1 minute conclusion, you can raise your hands. Otherwise, we can conclude this very interesting session. Yes, Dr. Sebastian and then Dr. Hamid Rashid, but just 1 minute, please. Dr. Sebastian.
Yeah, I'll try it with less than 1 minute. Just to add on to the flexibility requirement for resilience, and also how we get these last miles, especially now that funds are getting short. I think the key is decentralization. And decentralization automatically means resilience. And we see this in this, when Amphan hit the south of the South Bay of Bengal, the national grid went down, but the solar microgrids were all up and running. That is a key characteristic of decentralization. I think in these times now, we should focus more on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Hamid?
Yes, very quickly, my last word would be that while we look at the digital economy and the opportunities there, we have to look at it as glass half full, and also we have to look up the value chain, not the downstream. And what I mean by that is that when you talk about digital trade, e-commerce, and these are all already done. Where we need to go in terms of future is the higher value added in terms of anticipating demand, tracking demand, and being able to predict what the demand would be in 3 days' time or 5 days' time. Amazon and others are already doing that, and there's a huge opportunity for developing countries also to develop that kind of skill set that would make create a lot of jobs and also create prosperity out in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anil Chaudhary.
One of the things that was done incredibly well in Bangladesh is bottom-up development. And as far as bottom-up digital development is concerned, we've already heard the story of digital centers as talked about by Mr. Abul Kalam Azad. So at a time in 2009 and 10, when we did not have enough internet access across the country, we decided that we would start from the villages. And that has made a big difference because now we have digital centers in every union council of the country, 4,500. And those have created jobs, 10,000 digital jobs, and then more. They have created 4,500 bank branches supporting the social safety net, and it's creating new form of e-commerce. So focusing on the bottom with digital skills, with digital infrastructure, and the right type of business incentives will actually create these micro-entrepreneurship. These are all businesses, by the way. They are hosted in government offices, but they are run as businesses by entrepreneurs. So focusing on the right digital entrepreneurship at the very bottom of the totem pole, at the very bottom in the villages, I think is the right way to go, as we have evidenced. Thank you.
If I don't see any more hands, I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists for being with us. It's late in night in Bangladesh. You must be very tired. But again, thank you very much. And one thing I cannot miss before leaving, and that is I could not agree more with our president from FBCCI. This issue is very dear to my heart, and that is the tremendous capacity, absorptive capacity of our rural economy or agricultural sector. So in these difficult times, we see again how resilient the sector is, and we are hoping that you know in the coming critical sort of days ahead of us, especially when the hundreds of thousands of migrants workers would be returning, then this agricultural sector and the rural sector will have to absorb a big quantity of these incoming groups of vulnerable population. We have a couple of announcements. That is session 2, our virtual Rohingya camp visit will commence at 1600 hours GMT plus 6 tomorrow, that is 28 July. And session 3, Rohingya case in ICJ, road to accountability and justice at 1930 hours GMT plus 6 tomorrow also, that is 28th July. Again, before concluding this session, there will be a virtual tour and talk on Rohingya crisis and a promo video that would be there. So good night to all in Bangladesh, and good afternoon, and again good morning in other parts of the world. Thank you very much for being with us and remaining very engaged, at least in terms of asking interesting questions. Thank you very much. Good night.